wayward vagabond makes their way into pale Obsidim. A simple observation, really. You don't appear to be wearing the mountain's breath upon you. Worry not. The soot will set into your traveling mantle soon enough, though. I'm not quite sure you'll like it when it does. You are not the first to wander into these life-choked lands, and I doubt you will be the last. Obsidim is a city of great legend, where heroes and despots both made their homes, though I suppose time has a way of making legends of us all. Tell me, do you come here seeking ancient power, infamy for besting the crags and peaks of this shattered land? Or perhaps you look for a place to rest your weary bones after many, many trials? Stay, and you may yet meet with the stewards of this broken country. Echoes, memories of lives past lived, clinging to this land like a tick upon the elk's back. Or perhaps scorch marks on a well-used hearth, having long fallen into disrepair. But be careful, for even in memory the dragon's fangs are still sharp. Go, slay Veidos, claim what is unrightfully his, bring peace to these ashened souls, and mayhaps you will find your peace, if the embers do not consume you first.
Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. So what's the deal with Ashened? Well, they're a series of dark attribute pyro-type monsters centered on the big bad Veidos, the eruption dragon of extinction, as well as the doomed landscape this all takes place in, the field spell Obsidim, the Ashened City. Our monsters are easier to summon when that's on the field, and many gain a bonus effect when your opponent controls a monster with 2800 or more attack, which just so happens to be Veidos' attack. But to get a full scope of how they operate under these conditions, let's go ahead and cover our two big named cards, starting with our field spell. Obsidim, the Ashened City, is a field spell card that turns all of your opponent's special summoned monsters into pyros during your turn only. During your end phase, you can target another copy of Obsidim, the Ashened City that's in your grave, and place it on the bottom of your deck, then draw a card. And if this card in the field zone is destroyed or banished, you can special summon an Ashened monster from your deck. The whole point of this card is to be destroyed, as it gets you one of your Ashened, and getting another into rotation recycles the other one and draws you a card. But don't forget that type changing effect either, that's going to be pretty relevant pretty soon. For now, we're going to cover the cards that's going to help us pop that spell, Veidos, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction, a level 9 monster with 2800 attack and 1500 defense. During the main phase, if this card is in your hand as a quick effect, you can target any card in a field zone to special summon this card to your opponent's field, and if you do, destroy that card. Then you can add to your hand or set an Ashened continuous trap card from your deck to the field. If this card is sent from your opponent's field to your graveyard, you can destroy all monsters on the field. So with this little combo, you can play Obsidim, pop it with Veidos, and while your opponent gets a big dragon, you get a free monster. And once you get this sent from the field back to the graveyard, you get an optional dark hole to help clear things out, especially helpful if your opponent has a whole board of monsters that you want to get rid of. And don't get so caught up in the Obsidim combo that you forget that this can destroy any field spell. So if your opponent has one that's integral to their game plan, this is effectively a quick effect field spell kaiju. It's kinda nutty. It's an odd duo of cards to be sure, but between the excellent attribute and great new pyro support, this is going to shape up to be quite the menace. You'll have everything you need to make your own extinction event. Alright, now that those are covered, let's go over our Ashened monsters, all of whom share an effect, as well as being Dark Pyros. If Obsidim, the Ashen City, is in the field zone, you can special summon them from your hand, but you can only special summon these monsters once per turn using that effect each. Our first monster is Priestess of the Ashened City, a level 4 monster with 1200 attack and 1300 defense, and if normal or special summoned, can add an Ashened card from your deck to your hand, except a copy of itself. Yeah, this grabs you basically every member of your theme, except Veidos, because as it turns out, it's not actually name-stamped, but we do still have a way to access it now via some new support, finally making it so Priestess has access to the entire deck. And as a level 4 monster, this is one half of a number of rank 4s that you could make. And while I harp on that quality for a lot of themes, there's a pretty recent addition that we'll get into during our tech pick section that makes that access very relevant. Priestess really is doing a lot to keep this fire burning. A regular fire keeper, if you will. Shaman of the Ashened City is a level 4 monster with 1300 attack and 1200 defense that lets you target 3 of your pyro monsters that are banished and or are in your grave and shuffles them into the deck. Then, if you shuffled an Ashened monster as part of that, you can add an Obsidim the Ashened City from your deck to your hand. This is a pretty odd inclusion. We already have Priestess grabbing us any Ashened card, which does cover the field spell, and while Shaman can help to alleviate the pressure of having to grab the field spell, you also need to have a stocked up grave and or banishment to make this happen, so you aren't doing this right out of the gate. The bonus is that it not only recycles our on-theme monsters, but any pyros we tech in as well. And being another level 4 monster that we can freely special summon isn't the worst. I wouldn't want to see this in my opening hand necessarily, but it sure knows how to shuffle off the Mortal Coil in style. Spearhead of the Ashened City is a level 4 monster with 1700 attack and 100 defense, and if your opponent controls a monster with 2800 attack or more, you can tribute this card, then target a card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. This is cool because you can choose to either return Veidos back to your own hand or remove a different problem card. And hey, now that you're in the grave, you're that much more ready to use Shaman's effect. This monster is pretty good, sporting a decent attack stat and a pretty swell piece of spot removal, but nothing much more important, so despite the equipment, I don't think this monster is going to be spearheading anything. Hero of the Ashened City is a level 7 monster with 2600 attack and 2100 defense, and during the main phase, as a quick effect, you can target a pyro monster on the field and destroy it. Then, if you destroyed Veidos, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction, by this effect, you can place an Obsidim the Ashened City from your deck face up in your field zone. Wow, that's a really good, like incredibly good. You give your opponent Veidos, summon this out if you popped Obsidim, and now at any time during their main phase, Hero can destroy the Veidos while setting up a new copy of your field spell, as well as threatening to wipe their entire monster lineup in the process if you use the Dark Hole effect. Granted, you will lose Hero as well as any of your other monsters that you've accrued, but that's a small price to pay for dominating the board. Or, if you want to be less explosive, remember that Obsidim turns your opponent's special summoned monsters into pyros on your own turn. So this can actually be a nifty piece of spot removal if you have that in play. And, thankfully, we dodged a bullet on that name. A few more capital letters and I need to find a way to tie this in with Jaden's favorite deck, which is only the second closest call we've had when it comes to card names. I'm very sad that this doesn't work at all with Albaz the Ashen. Ugh. King of the Ashened City is a level 8 monster with 1400 attack and 2700 defense, and during your main phase, you can special summon an Ashened monster from your hand except a copy of this card, or if your opponent controls a monster with 2800 or more attack, you can special summon from your deck instead. Now, special summoning from the hand is kinda lame, I'm not gonna lie. Unless we somehow found a way to put this onto the board without Obsidim, that'll be on the board and all of our monsters have their own inherent summoning effect while that field spell is on the board. It's pretty redundant, but being able to summon from the deck, now that's the good stuff. In fact, we can summon this off of Veidos' field spell Destruction instead of Hero, then use King to summon Hero to give us more board presence if we need it. Honestly, I have mixed feelings about this card, but if I'm being fair, I wouldn't be at my best if I was perpetually reliving a soul memory of my entire land being destroyed by a giant vengeful dragon. Might be time for this guy to take a break on the couch for a bit, let him be the Sofa King Ashen for a bit. Next up, we have a couple of fusion monsters to round out the team. First is Embers of the Ashened, a level 8 monster with 2900 attack and 2400 defense, requiring any 2 pyro monsters as material. If fusion summoned, you can target a field spell in your grave and add it to your hand, and at the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's pyro monster, you can destroy that monster, and if it's your turn, this card can make a second attack in a row. So generally, this is how you get back an Obsidim. Though, technically it's not restricted, so any field spell shenanigans work here. Which is great, because the effect that turns your opponent's monsters into pyros is going to be very helpful with Ember's multi-attack. This is just a solid monster that helps us clear out boards, contest Veidos, and provides an outlet for some very important cards. The Ashened may be burned down, but it still leaves some Embers for rekindling. Yeah, give or take a few hundred defense points. Veidos, the Dragon of Endless Darkness, is a level 10 monster with 3000 attack and 1700 defense, requiring Veidos, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction, and 2 or more level 9 or lower pyro monsters as material. It can't be destroyed by any card effects, also your opponent can't target it with monster effects. If this card is fusion summoned, you can destroy all spell and trap cards your opponent controls, and when your opponent activates a card or effect on the field as a quick effect, you can send a face-up Ashened card you control to the grave to destroy that card. Folks, say hello to our big game ender. This card is sick. Spoilers, but we're going to be trying to fuse this with original Veidos while it's on our opponent's side of the field, triggering its board wipe, which won't bother us at all because fusion Veidos can't be destroyed by card effects at all. Now, I do wish the targeting protection didn't leave this vulnerable to the eternal tech pick Book of Moon, but stopping monsters is pretty good as well. That board wipe also complements Fusion Veidos' Harpy's Feather Duster effect, leaving your opponent with a barren field, easily allowing your army of souls to overwhelm your opponent once you rebuild. And while the last effect isn't negation, it is Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, and that's been a pretty savage hand trap on and off over the years. This makes for a fantastic new centerpiece for the deck, and I can't wait to follow through on sequences where we gift our opponent cards only to leave them with nothing. Also, trapping the souls in the wings, very nice touch. Alright, that covers all of our monsters, now it's time for the spells and traps. Extinguishing the Ashened is a normal spell card that sends a dark pyro monster from your deck to the grave, then you can add a level 5 or higher pyro monster from your grave to your hand, but for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck except pyro monsters. You can also banish this card from your grave to fusion summon a pyro fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as material. This might as well read like a search card for Veidos, sending it directly from your deck to the graveyard, then popping it right back into your hand. Though, because it grabs any level 5 or higher pyro monster, Hero and King are fair targets as well. And because Priestess can search Extinguishing, there is really only one card we can't access, more on that in a bit. We also can't rule out other high level pyro monsters like a Volcanic Emperor, who works best while in the grave. How about Uriah? Look, we have continuous trap cards, it counts. Awakening of Veidos is a quick play spell card that places an Obsidim, the Ashened City, from your deck face up in either field zone. Then, if your opponent controls a card in their field zone, you can add a level 5 or higher Dark Pyro monster from your deck to your hand. But for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, you can't special summon monsters from the deck or extra deck except Pyro monsters. Bit more strict than Extinguish, but makes for another great way to get Veidos into rotation. Give your opponent Obsidim, especially at a time where hitting their own field spell would be devastating. Give yourself Veidos, then pop the field spell with the dragon to summon it out to your opponent's field and get your shenanigans going. And remember, original Veidos' summon effect is a quick one, so you can also pop the field at any time during the main phases in case things get spicy. In fact, since almost everything involved in this play sequence is a quick effect, you could just flip Awakening of Veidos during your opponent's turn, and then you barely have to worry about the summon locks. But, you know, I get it now. If I was woken from my lava nap, I'd also go on a country-destroying rampage. At least. Rekindling of the Ashened is a quick play spell card that has you placing an Ashened card that is banished or is in your grave on the bottom of your main deck, except a copy of this card, then target an effect monster your opponent controls and negate its effects until the end of this turn. This is just a nice little card you can grab off of Priestess if you don't need any other combo pieces, letting you recycle an Ashened card while negating a monster for the turn. This feels a lot more like the job of non-engine cards at the moment, and I certainly wouldn't be caught dead without a few copies of Imperm or Veilers myself, but it is still good to have some negation in engine as a searchable supplement. But I gotta know, is Ember trying to parry the breath weapon? And even more importantly, does that work? Ashened for Eternity is a continuous trap card that, when activated, adds a Veidos, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction, or an Ashened monster from your grave to your hand. It can also target a face-up monster your opponent controls that you own and take control of that monster, then you can make all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls lose attack equal to the targeted monster's original attack, and these changes last until the end of this turn. This is the first option that you can grab off of Veidos' own summon effect, and it's kind of a doozy. It basically gives you permanent control back of your Veidos, and it takes its 2800 attack power and tears it away from your opponent's monsters, more likely than not making it so they don't have any attack. And once you have a grave full of your on-theme monsters, being able to grab any of them back out of your graveyard to restart your plays is pretty nice. It'll certainly get you the tools you need to close games out so they don't drag on for eternity. Ashened to Endlessness is a continuous trap card that, during the main phase, lets you fusion summon a Pyro Fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from either field as fusion material, including a Veidos, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction. And if you do, it gains 500 attack for each material used for its summon. You can also banish this card and a Dark Pyro monster from your grave, and all monsters your opponent currently controls become Pyro until the end of this turn. Now, this is one of our best cards, especially in conjunction with the summon that came along with it. If you can pull this off during your own turn and you have Obsidim active, well, all of your opponent's special summoned monsters are Pyro, so you get to super poly all of their monsters that have levels that are level 9 and lower. There are some exceptions, Link and Xyz monsters. This is also why Fusion Veidos lets you use more than 2 Pyro material. It doesn't have any built-in reason to use more material than you should, but this lets you scoop up more monsters and gain more attack off of Endlessness's effect. Heck, even if Obsidim isn't active, but you have another Endlessness in grave, you can use that effect to pyroatize their entire field first. And while the Pyro Fusion pool is pretty shallow right now, with even fewer options that are actually usable, don't let that fool you, because with this card, the possibilities are endlessness. Alright, that's all of the Ashened cards. Let's go over a little combo that you can do with them, and all you need for it is a single card, Awakening of Veidos, since it assembles the 2 parts that you need, Obsidim and Veidos. Granted, Awakening isn't searchable by anything, so sometimes it'll have to be a 2-card combo, but the upside is if you have all the cards natively, you won't have to incur the Awakening lock. And thankfully, both cards can be searched out by Priestess, while the field spell can be found with Terraforming, and Veidos can be grabbed via Priestess searching Extinguished, and Priestess can also be found with Bonfire. You know, if you have the spare triple-digit price point that a playset of that would require. God, I hope that price tanks sometime soon. Regardless of how you get your pieces, have Veidos pop the field spell, giving your opponent the big dragon, and using its effect to set Endlessness from your deck to your field. The float from Obsidim will get you King, and because your opponent now controls a monster with 2800 attack, King can summon Priestess directly from your deck if you haven't already used it. Otherwise, Hero is a good choice to give you some flexible removal. Though you won't necessarily need it, because on your opponent's turn, you can flip Endlessness to turn their Veidos and the 2 Ashen that you control into Fusion Veidos, and while this doesn't fuse away our opponent's board, any Pyros they're already running notwithstanding, you'll still trigger original Veidos' effect to blow up the entire field. And if you did the line where you haven't used Priestess to set things up, King can summon Priestess so that you can search out another copy of Obsidim. That way you can recycle the destroyed copy during the end phase for a draw. It's not flashy, but does provide a lot of removal, an effect that is very relevant considering the source material. Alright, so that's all of the Ashened cards, but what do we do with them? Well, Beatdown feels strange. Like, we have big monsters, but we don't really want to fight with them. We just want to explode everything and then just run over our opponent from there. So we're looking for cards that assemble our combo, cards that complement our Scorched Earth strategy, and ensure our opponent's smoldering flames stay snuffed out. So what can we play to help them out? First off, we need more ways to assemble our monsters, and like King of the Feral Imps before it, Infernal Flame Banshee is here to provide us with their tutoring services. And the best part is, it takes any level 4 monsters as material, so we can play cards like Goblinberg and Photon Thrasher to help bridge the gaps. Or if you want to play a modern card pool, I suppose you could also play Aratama and Sakitama. Normal summon Aratama, it searches out Sakitama, and Sakitama gives you a free normal summon. Boom, rank 4 right there. Or, if we want to help keep us within the dark attribute ranks, Kageto Kage not only fits that bill, but it's also a reptile, which means you can search it off of King of the Feral Imp, so you have 2 Xyz monsters that search niche types, and that just seems fun on its face. If we want to do a little hand fixing, Allure of Darkness not only helps us dig deeper into our deck, but any pyro we banish off its effect can be recycled with Shaman, giving us a way to benefit from its effect sooner than usual. If we're looking for a theme to splash in with ours, well, Snake Eye may seem like the most obvious choice because of the pyro overlaps, and while I'm not going to disavow such a thing, I feel like the deck is already strong enough as it is. Instead, we may want to convene with another big pyro theme, Volcanics. I joked earlier about it, but Volcanic Emperor is also a giant pyro monster that sets a trap when you summon it. And not only does this one help provide a steady stream of burn damage, it also gives us a big chunk of it via the card Volcanic Emissions. Since we're giving our opponent Veidos, that gives us a healthy target for the second effect, burning our opponent for 2800 attack. And with the 1500 damage you're likely to be dealing off of Emperor's first summon, your opponent will be down to only 3700 life points, with a special summon tax built right into Emperor to help exacerbate things. Not really a good situation for our opponent to be in, especially if you can trigger another Emperor burn on the following turn, which is probably going to be another 3000 damage. And we certainly can't forget all of the amazing resource tools we have available to us, like Volcanic Shell, Blaze Accelerator Reload, and a Trooper. Oh, and as long as you're playing all these fire pyro monsters, you might as well throw in a copy of Volcanic Counter to dissuade any battle damage. Agnimal Candle is a cute little pyro tuner that we can special summon if we searched it. Hello again to Bonfire. Please get reprinted. This is important because as a field spell focused deck, Ancient Fairy Dragon can do a lot of work for us. By popping Obsidim, we can get a free Ashened monster, as well as it being another vector for getting monsters out of our hand. The only question is, what other field spell would we play to make full use of AFD's effect? And for that, we actually have to turn towards some other TCG exclusive cards that come out in this very set. Multi-Universe is a field spell that you can only play if you don't control a face-up card in the field zone, and it lets you target a field spell in your grave or banishment to destroy Multi-Universe, then place that card in your field zone, essentially letting you recycle Obsidim. It even has utility in the mirror match because it can be used to prevent any card in the field zones from being destroyed by banishing itself, so that's pretty neat. And it even comes with Krishnerd Witch, a card that names Multi-Universe in its text, summons itself from hand when a card in the field spell leaves the field by a card effect, hint hint Veidos, and when a field spell activates its effect, you can take a monster from your grave or banishment and put it back into your deck, unless that monster mentions the activated field spell, in which case you can special summon it. This can be used to get back other copies of Krishnerd Witch if you still have Multi-Universe on board, but also when Obsidim uses its end phase effect, because all of our Ashened monsters mention Obsidim, so you can summon them back to the field with it. And a quick aside, we have another new addition, Jungle Dweller, which is easily summoned by banishing a light or dark monster from your grave, so, you know, Ashened, and has an effect that recycles your field spells from your grave or banishment while blowing up cards. It's a pretty sweet effect. We may have endlessness to use our opponent's monsters for summons, but don't be too proud to also run Super Polymerization. Not only will we be able to avoid responses, we can summon a wider range of monsters with it. But what about the pyro fusions we can make with endlessness, outside of the 2 on-theme options we've covered already? Well, if you're ever up against a machine deck, Blaze Phoenix, the burning bombardment bird, is still somehow legal, so you can get a big monster that can deal some incidental burn damage that way. That's really all the generic monsters we can utilize, but another cool include is Gaia Prominence, the Fierce Force. We can either play a fusion substitute monster or play fusion armament to summon out the needed Gaia Blaze, the Force of the Sun, directly from our extra deck. And for all that work, we get monster effect negation that works against ones that activate in hand or grave, and when it destroys a monster by attacking over it in battle, you can summon a fire monster from your grave, which is admittedly better if you're running any of your fire splashed themes. Now, we're not going to be able to summon back the synchro monster because we summoned it improperly with fusion armament, but it is another level 7 synchro, so if you're running Agnimal Candle, sure, why not? You also shouldn't count out kaijus as part of the roster. Not only is it another way to trigger a Veidos we've given to our opponent, it is still a way to transform powerful monsters into vanilla threats. Even ones big enough to help us trigger our Ashened effects that require our opponent to have a 2800 or higher attack monster. And Ashened for Eternity can target any monster your opponent controls that you own, not just Veidos, so we can steal those kaijus right back and retaliate with them, especially if we have the Kyoto waterfront to make use of their powerful abilities. As for a silly tech pick, this is something we've picked up from our old pals in Runic, Card Scanner. Because both Obsidim and Rekindling put a card on the bottom of our deck, we'll be able to tell what kind of card they are. Our opponent does unfortunately have a chance to grab a free card of their own, but their chance versus our certainty is pretty good odds. Alright, so that's all the info I have on the Ashened, but how does it stack up against the Nova scale? Novelty. What's fresh about this deck is its commitment to the bit, and the payoff that you get for it. Giving your opponent monsters seems to be part of the status quo in Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole. Between cards like the Gen and Ken twins, Sanctifier Albion, and the whole new gimmick puppet crew. And while you are given many ways to deal with the big monster you just gave to your opponent, you have multiple avenues to explore for it. And while Pyro is the new rock in terms of a theme that was very underserved, getting a lot of saturation over a short period of time, there is still an abysmally low amount of Pyros in the game, and Ashened works on an axis different from existing ones. Though that doesn't mean that there isn't some overlap, so Ashened get a 3 in Novelty. Objectivity. Original Veidos doesn't have an activated effect on the field, which is good because if it did, we'd be having the same triple tactics, talent, and thrust discussions we were having when Gen and Ken first came out. This deck has a lot of removal, but also has a lot of hoops it has to jump through to work it out. And unless there's anything I'm missing, there isn't some souped up combo that's gonna FTK the opponent or lock out the game. At least not any more than current decks do. I'm looking at you, Volcanic Snake Eye. This deck has a fun and interesting way of interacting with our opponent, so I'm giving the theme a 5 in Objectivity. Versatility. Aside from some Pyro crossovers, this doesn't really do anything with other decks. We have a long way to go before Pyro gets enough generic support and a pool of cards it can work with before we can consider splashing them into other decks consistently. And the current landscape just doesn't have a need for a deck so focused on its own game plan to the detriment of their other objectives. There's a few cards we can swing in, but not enough for me to give this more than a 2 in Versatility. Awesomeness. Honestly, this deck is so rad. The idea of giving your opponent the giant monster that threatens your people, giving you ways to tame it or make it worse, subdue it or let it rampage is just so neat. And the fact that it's mixed up in a kind of anti-pro field spell web of effects gives it an edge all its own. So I'm giving Ashened a 5 in Awesomeness, which means they score a total of 15 out of 20 on the Nova scale.
And so it is done. You have learned the ways of the eternal Ash. But wilt thou leave this world devoid of color? Or will you carry some semblance of its dark majesty into the wider world, wielding its power as you see fit? Either way, this old man is thankful to have been of some help along your journey. And now, as tradition dictates, I shall now send praise to those who have supported in this eternal vigil. From this tome, I send praise to Quasar Commanders, the Critic of Innocence, and Upstairs Media, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Awexa Toahime, Anansi Dragon, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Emony Chan, Eric, Erin the Worldbreaker, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Groog, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Mega Combi, Millennia Asta, Musiki Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Serenity Towns, Sky Buster Leo, That One Dumbass, and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Alpha Sly, Almento 5010, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Baron Von Titty Sprinkles, Beluga Master, Blitzwolf, Blue Gem, Borger with a Shotgun, Callum McCann, Chaz Ghost, Childish Lamar, Dr. Reaper R.I.P., Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Ignis Heat the True Draco Slayer, Inblink, Jester Design, Kale the Dragon, Kevon Public, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh!, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, Mick Spoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Nitromo, Obsidian, Ramen Resurrect-chan, Sea-Wing 22, Shizuka Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, Terror Top to 3, the legendary Raven, and Zaldrega. If thou'st would wish to join this vigil, you need only turn your gaze below, and sacred pathways will be made known to you. Rest well, traveler. You do not know when you will find another.